The summer I was 7 began with cicadas and a latch that wouldn't stay shut. The old house across the lane breathed with the heat, and every room wore the scent of lilac and rain, even though the rain hadn't come. My grandmother said the house remembered, and if you listened hard enough, you could hear the days in the walls, folding into themselves like yellowed papers. I believed her then. Because belief is what keeps a child steady when the world tilts and the grown-ups' explanations tremble at the edges. The house was a grandmother's glove, a warm, heavy thing that held all the good and the bad you kept in your pockets and forgot to wash out. It stood silent on its wobbly foundation, with a porch swing that moved when no one touched it, as if the air itself gave the swing a gentle push to remind us we were never truly alone. There was a kitchen table with a map of smudges and sticky fingerprints that never quite faded, and a pantry that smelled like distant summers and promises you thought you'd forgotten but hadn't. In the back, the garden pressed against the river, an ordinary, fierce place where frogs kept time with the moon and the water ran dark and bright at once. On the 4th evening of the slow, sun-bleached week, my cousin Lila came to stay with us. It wasn't that she was lost to the world, exactly. It was just that the world hadn't quite sorted itself yet around her. She wore the colour of new rain on her skin and moved as if she'd stepped out of a doorway that wasn't meant for us to pass through. She spoke in whispers that sounded almost like wind chimes, and she looked at the house the way a child looks at a tall man who might bend to hear her if she asked nicely. The ritual began, as all small rituals do, with a question we should have left alone. It started one hot night when the ceiling fans were too loud and the river too patient. My grandmother, soft as bread crust, old as the stories she kept in her pockets, told us our memory was a thing we could cradle or frighten away with care or carelessness. In the kitchen, we drew a circle in chalk on the table's oil-stained wood, not perfectly round, but honest in its imperfection, and placed a single coin at the circle's north point. Then we whispered the name of the vanished child, Nell, into the air, 3 times, exactly as she'd vanished. Once for the day she was born into the memory of the town, once for the day she disappeared, and once for the day we would be brave enough to face what that disappearance had done to us all. The house listened. It always listened when you asked it to do so, with a child's earnestness and a grown person's desperation not to be left with the guilt of a question left unspoken. The lamp by the kitchen window flickered, even though the wires held, and a scent rose sweet, sour, a hint of old paper and rain. The attic door breathed open just a fraction, as if a mouth somewhere inside the house yawned and reminded us that there were rooms we had yet to learn, to love and to fear. Nell didn't come back, at least not in any way we could name. But the house did not abandon us either. It remembered Nell the way it remembers all its tenants who vanish. Not as a ghost, but as a presence, subtle, patient and stubborn. The walls learned to carry the quiet. The staircase learned to sigh. The clock learned that its own heartbeat could be slower or faster, depending on the room you inhabited. And Nell, in that sense, became a thread in the fabric of the house, something we could pull on with a question and feel the world shift a little, as if time itself bent to listen. I grew older, as one does who sits too long with the memory of a summer, and Nell faded into the periphery of our family tales. Every grandmother's patient admonition about not digging too far, every aunt's soft laugh when someone reminded us that some questions were better left alone. Yet the house did not forget. It kept Nell In the corners of the rooms, a presence you could feel if you stood very still and listened to the clock breathe, and the wind carrying the Rither's voice through the cracks in the window frames. Decades later, I returned to the old lane, white hair catching the light like frost on a window pane. The house stood there, older and more patient, as if it had grown with me. The door's hinge complained with a sound I knew as well as the pulse in my wrist. The attic stair cradled a memory I had not learned to name yet. Inside, the rooms wore a quiet that felt almost ceremonial, as if a long ceremonial night had finally finished its last vigil and decided to rest. In the attic, I found the box, a small dust-laden chest with a latch that resisted, as if the chest did not want to release what lay inside. The label on the lid was my aunt's handwriting from years before, Nell's name looping across the paper in a script I once believed belonged to someone else's memory. The lid opened with a sigh, and inside lay a stack of things Nell had kept. Small bits of ribbon, a faded photograph of a river at dusk, a brittle letter with a seal I recognized as Nell's mother's. The letter, when I unfolded it, did not address Nell as a person, but as a memory, a thing we protect by tucking away and never speaking aloud. It was written in Nell's mother's hand, but the dates bore a different weight now, as if time itself had rearranged the days to line up with the present. It spoke of a circle, of a night when Nell's breath was noticed by the walls, and of a decision not to forget Nell, but to teach us to carry Nell as if Nell could walk out from the pages of a book and walk into our lives again. That's when the house began to show me what I had refused to see when I was 7, and believed so earnestly that memory was a toy you could hold and then put away. Nell's letters were not just a girl's life saved in a trunk. They were a map of the house's own hunger. The old place did not want Nell to vanish again. It wanted me to remember her with a gravity I had learned only from aging and guilt. In the circle I'd drawn as a child, Nell's name glowed faintly on the walls, as if the house itself wore the letters in its own stone. The rooms remembered Nell more vividly than I did. The lilac scent, the way her laughter used to ripple across the parlour carpet, the way the attic's leather-bound journals held her breath on the pages, the way the river's memory pressed its cool kiss against the glass of the back window. The house did not merely house Nell's memory. It had become Nell's memory's keeper, in effect a living archive that grew more exact the longer you listened to it. Then came the quiet thing that startled me more than any sudden sound. I found my own handwriting in Nell's mother's letters,